The real elephant in the room here is the flood story. It's not Adam and Eve, it's the flood.
He has not done his homework on this issue.
That all of the world was wiped out in a flood that is indefensible.
Do Christians really have to believe in this floating bathtub? And my answer to that is,
according to Dr. Craig's video, there is a discussion on the veracity of the historical narrative of Noah's Ark and the flood. We're going to look at 3 points and 3 things that we believe he got right and 4 things that he got wrong.
To think that within the span of human history, all of the world's terrestrial life was wiped out in a flood, except for that aboard the ark. That is indefensible scientifically, historically, and linguistically.
There's many problematic things that we saw in this video, and I think that you also know him personally. So could you tell us a little bit more about the things that you observed?
okay, well, first I want to say what he got right.
Okay.
He got right that the flood is the elephant in the room. It's the really important part of Genesis chapters 1 through 11. I've had the privilege of speaking in 37 countries, and I've found that most Christians, including most evangelical Christian theologians, have totally ignored the flood. As a result, they believe in millions of years, and many of them believe in evolution. It's not just the flood that's important. The whole 11 chapters of Genesis 1 to 11 are important because they are the foundation for everything in the rest of the Bible. So there we learn that man is unique from all the other creatures. He's made in the image of God. There we learn the origin of sin and death. We learn the origin of nations and languages. It's in Genesis that we learn about the origin of marriage, that it's one man to one woman, and that there are only 2 genders. So Genesis is foundational to everything else in the Bible.
And therefore, so many people try to interpret the flood story as being a description of a local flood. But honestly, as I read the flood story, it's very clear that what is described there is a worldwide flood.
The second thing he got right is that Genesis does describe a global flood, and he mentioned a few of the points. Consider first the purpose of the flood. It was to destroy all the people not in the ark, but also all the land animals and all the birds not in the ark, and the surface of the earth itself. The Bible describes this not as, a spring rain to water the garden and a little bit of rising water, but it talks about torrential rain 24 hours a day, day after day, week after week, and the fountains of the great deep bursting open. Earthquakes on the ocean floor, tsunamis. This was a catastrophic global event. It lasted 371 days from the beginning to when they got off the ark. No local flood in the Middle East could last that long.
Where all of mankind and everything that breathes on earth is wiped out in this flood, except for those aboard the ark. The mountains are covered by the water.
So this was a global event. But then we also have to think about the purpose of the ark. It was to save not a few animals to start a farm after the flood, but to save representatives of every kind of land, animal, and bird to repopulate the earth. If the flood was just in the Middle East, there's no need for the ark, because the animals outside the flood zone can flee. And as for Noah, this was a ridiculous building project. He could have just told them to go on a vacation to Europe. But then we also need to consider the size of the ark. It was way too big if this was a local flood. The dimensions of the ark. Naval engineers have actually done experiments with the ark based on the dimensions the Bible gives. The dimensions of the ark provide the most perfect balance of stability, strength, and comfort. We also have the landing of the ark. It didn't land down in the valley. It landed on the top of a mountain, and the Bible says it was 74 days before they could see any other mountain. So this was a global flood. One final evidence of the flood was that it was the rainbow at the end of the flood. And God made that promise not only to Noah and all of his descendants, but to the animals and the birds and all their offspring, and to the earth itself. And he repeated the promise 3 times in the space of about 10 verses in Genesis 9. So if the flood was a local flood in the Middle East, then God lied, because there have been many local floods that have killed some animals, some birds, some people, and destroyed some of the earth. Only a global flood fits the rainbow promise. Don't see it because they're wearing the wrong glasses.
When we had our little babies, had a diaper changing pad that featured Noah's Ark. And I would look at that and I would think to myself, is that what we as biblical Christians are committed to? And this understanding now of the flood narrative as mytho-history has so liberated me that now I love the flood story. And now it fills me with warm feelings.